Greetings travellers and welcome back to the channel. Today's video is a record breaker. Not too long ago I featured a video of a tiefling bard called Ciri. This was a commission and her backstory was the grand total of 3 pages long. At that point in time I figured that it couldn't be beat. I was wrong. Today's commission from Twitter, thank you very much by the way, you know who you are, had 2 characters with a combined total of 9 pages of backstory. So now that's out of the way, let us begin. The heroic tale of Sir Marcus of House Ashford and Sir Clyff the Ranger. The young Marcus Ashford was born as second son to Lord Orson of Riverguard, Baron of the Woodhurst country, and Protector of the Horndean, Patriarch of the House Ashford, and Lady Rosalinda of Rosetta and Curdwall. He was second born after Leighton Ashford, 6 years his elder, a sickly and frail academically inclined child, and Anastasia Ashford, the songbird of Riverguard, 3 years Marcus's younger. While Lord Orson took great care in personally raising all of his children with stern attention and care, and had great affection for all of them, his political mind, through necessity, had him raise his second son as his eventual replacement, far more than his first. Fearing Leighton would not survive the stresses of rule and command, this grim reality was understood much earlier than Orson might have imagined by Leighton. Keen beyond his years, who busied himself with managing the taxes and financial responsibilities of his house, quietly and willingly so receding into the background, while his younger brother was left to train in all the standard knightly affairs of military expertise and leadership. Anastasia, being troubled from much of her youth, was sent to the capital of Ersterland at a young age in order to progress her interest in magic and songcraft, particularly her love of the harp. Marcus's own youth was generally a pleasant one in the early-most years, with freedoms enough to make him reasonably willful and guided leeway enough to develop his natural charm to endear him to Riverguard and its people. He spent his seasons playing in the dust with the town's children during summer afternoons, catching fish along the rivers when the autumn streams brought the great catch, hunting the Horndean during the winters where meat was lean, and riding the best of Lord Rose's springtime harass whenever his father's lordy friends would visit their hold and bring with them gifts of swords and steeds. About 2 years before the birth of Marcus, Clyff was born to a chambermaid of Ashford House and a seasonal hunter who had been employed by the family during a particularly long winter. The wood elf boy was allowed to stay with his mother in the servants' quarters, spending the first few years of his life among the staff. He was naturally a hard worker, if somewhat distracted by an incessant call to the wilds. From an early age, the boy seemed to have an affinity for hiding, moving about the shadows, clambering into and over anything he could find, rooftops and battlements included. By his 10th birthday, he had long since become friendly with Marcus, the two of them sharing a childish sense of brotherhood. Marcus teaching Clyff the value of being careful and appropriate when the situation calls for it, and Clyff encouraging the other to sneak out with him in the middle of the night and exploring the wilds, together learning how to survive and learning to trust the instincts of the other. However, it was not long after when Clyff had begun to chafe against the restrictions placed upon him by the civility of his surroundings. With his mother dying before his 12th birthday, Clyff began to retreat from town life, spending more evenings outside in the Horndean, bringing catch whenever the noble house requested it of him, and generally living a hermit life among the forests. With Clyff being absent, the friendly relationship between him and Marcus retreated into a more cordial, officious thing, the other moving on to other responsibilities. By Marcus's 19th birthday, King Hector had planned a grand tour of his lands, hoping to introduce the realm to his heir's new wife, Lady Liss the Green. It was a lavish affair, wishing to make up for not having had the chance to introduce her to many sworn to him and his house, primarily due to the unseasonal weather across the continent, making it difficult to travel for a wedding. By spring, they had made their way south and along the great rivers to Ashford lands, and settled their camp on the edge of Riverguard, eagerly falling into the festivities planned for their arrival. While things had run smoothly overall, drink and meat being served to the royal entourage, Marcus playing part as a host along with his family, Clyff, who had grown into a skilled and talented hunter, had been working with the town to provide the large score of food and resources required for the festival. Having been informally adopted in his youth by a local baker who lived at the edge of town and who gave the boy all the freedom he needed, he had become a hard and diligent worker, often happy enough to interact with Marcus whenever he had walked through town on the rare times Clyff attended the store. With the concentration of riches and power in such a small area, there was a surprisingly small amount of trouble that needed cleaning up, with Marcus having to intervene in a small scuffle between drunken soldiers and some poaching along the woods, and most curiously, the theft of some green gems from the future Queen's private pavilion. While he had been happy enough to lock the would-be thief up for the evening, the Queen's private guard, a beast of a man, had insisted on executing the boy. While inspecting the gems, Marcus had the strange desire to chew on them, only barely refraining. Assuming correctly that they had some magical properties, Marcus argued that the man should be let go, as he might have had been drawn to them, as Marcus was. When the guard tried to force the issue, Marcus quickly disarmed him, claiming a wicked knife from the man for his troubles. As the first few days of celebration continued, and finally met the day of a great wedding feast, which had been held many a time prior, tragedy struck when the afternoon hunt ran along. With the king not returning from the King's Wood by the start of the evening's feast, confusion started moving through the assembled men, questions rising to Orson, who had very little in the way of answer. Marcus, knowing that the woods could be a treacherous thing, sought out Clyff, the two of them entering the Horndean in search of the crown party. There, after a long and difficult trek, they came across a gruesome scene presided over by an incensed dryad which had in turn enchanted a bear, together having massacred the royal hunting party, killing the king and gravely wounding his son. While fighting the Fey being, the part nature of the power the creature wielded was broken, a charm which convinced the beasts around it that the hunting party had been destroying the forests and wastefully killing with abandon. There was a powerful charming magic bound to a ring of power, which the Dryad had covertly protected, which upon further study granted its wielder power over earth and stone. While reluctant, the two ended up killing the spirit and the bear under its command, returning with proof of the king's death and the creature which had done it. Marcus then claimed the ring as his own, the Dryad's influence broken over it. At first the prince, now king, Callum had not believed that his father could have been killed by such a creature. He was adamant that this was some greater ploy to grasp power by their rival house, Marat. Before he could command any violence, however, his new wife's soothing presence had him calmed, eventually thanking Marcus and the serf hunter, offering gifts for services rendered. Marcus, having learnt that Lys was a powerful sorceress, asks for magic to heal and restore his brother and give him the life he was always supposed to have. Lys provided, and with her powerful magic created a new body for Leighton. Clyff had asked for free rein to hunt the King's Wood, and so was named Sir Clyff the Hunter. With his brother revitalized, Marcus was freed of his direct responsibility. Over the course of only a few months, his brother managed ferociously to catch up with him, developing an aptitude for magic he had never knew he had, showing a natural charm which seemed to have been hidden beneath his illness. While not begrudging Leighton his newfound ambitions, Marcus found himself with alarmingly more free time than he knew what to do with. His training was restarted eagerly, now with a more martial approach, the young lordling set to wandering the Ashford lands, ensuring a kept peace and order where he went. Having shared a near-death experience, he and Clyff rekindled their childhood friendship, with the hunter joining him on his travels. Together, they visited distant places, travelled through the great forest almost to the edge of the western mountain ranges, and navigated the great swamplands set near its centre. Over this time, Marcus became competent in the use of his ring of power, which sparked in him a curiosity overall in regards to magic and craft. While Clyff had unearthed some of his own magic, he was never much of a teacher in that regard, leaving Marcus's curiosity in that realm unsatisfied. Marcus also refrained from talking to or bothering his brother needlessly, as the elder had become obsessed with work, often spending days upon days taking on tasks far beyond his purview, almost single-handedly managing the interests of House Ashford and relieving his father of much of his own toil. One day in Riverguard Town, Marcus came across a small shop which he had not frequented before. Assuming it to be a shop run by an eccentric newcomer, surprised at not having been informed prior to their arrival, he entered the store, finding it quiet, dusty, and messy. There, he met a fortune teller who foretold of a terrible sickly hellfire which would cross the land, burning through all men and women. She spoke of a great beast bound in cold contracts with devils and lords of evil searching for their stolen prize. She spoke of mortal men eating corruption bound in crystal and betraying their kin. Then she gifted Marcus a boon, a familiar, taking the form of a black cat named Mephis. She also gifted Marcus power through said familiar. She named herself Madame Manice, and then she was gone, the shop seemingly never having been there. The only sign of it not having been a dream, the black cat now bound to Marcus, a cat which could speak. From this revelation, unsure of who or what to do for answers, Marcus went to a local cleric and wise woman known as Mother Raisin, an ancient caretaker of the faith. Named so for her wrinkly visage, Marcus found her seated on the steps of the local chapel, feeding birds and smiling at passers-by while eating her beloved sweetbread. Together, they unweaved the first parts of the mystery. He refrained from telling her about his familiar, as he was afraid she would not condone his new powers and might remove them from him. She, having counselled him, gifted him a green potion of her own making, bound in faith and worship of the land and the world, and stated that it would gift him power if ever he needed it most. Once Marcus returned home, he found that his sister had returned from the capital. There was a great commotion, as this was not expected by any measure, as she had been away and reluctant in her writing as of late. She had acted strangely over dinner, being terse and suspicious, and Marcus was cautioned in his interactions with her by the prophecy of noble betrayal. It seemed that his brother found her behaviour not as distressing, claiming reasonably, when noted, that perhaps she had just been tired from her long trip. He was sure that by the morning she would be back to normal. In the dark of night, Anastasia had come to Marcus's room, where instead of a dagger in the dark, the surreptitious meeting was opened with embarrassment. Anastasia, finding her brother and Clyff, who had been a childhood friend of hers as well, sleeping together in bed. After negotiating through the mix of happiness and awkwardness, she managed to convey why she had been returned to her family at this time. She spoke at length about how she had noted the increasing wealth and spending of the crown, and, having befriended some ladies of the count, she had managed to learn some disturbing truths. King Callum, who had always been a domineering and powerful figure throughout his youth, had wasted away from public view, said to have become a shadow of his former self, rarely coming into view. In his stead, Queen Liss had taken to power of station, gathering vast amounts of wealth to fuel her sorcerous ambitions. Unsure as to where this wealth was coming from, as no tax laws had been formally amended, Anastasia asked around, finding that a majority of it was being sent as tribute by the noble houses. Immediately becoming suspicious of this, she managed to delicately probe the situation, finding that none of the major houses, her own included, were aware of these new tribute offers. Lys was, through some bribery or craft, siphoning off the wealth of the great houses, and no one had seemingly noticed. Now being home, she believed that one of two things was the most likely to be true. Either their elder brother had betrayed their household, along with key figures managing the wealth of the major houses, and had been bankrolling the magical experimentation of the Queen willingly, or they were under duress or control in some manner, perhaps even unaware of the situation. The sheer scale of the amounts moved around, along with her snooping about their brother's office that morning before announcing herself, suggested that he is either not aware or he is hiding something, even from himself. Together, Anastasia, Clyff, and Marcus managed to find and procure a purification and magical amulet ritual from Mother Raisin. Managing to secure a meeting with their eldest brother in a place of their own choosing, they managed to subdue and perform the ritual on him. To their surprise, Leighton started coughing, eventually retching up a singular green crystal. Securing the crystal away from his brother, Marcus immediately had the urge to swallow it himself, but was stopped by Clyff. Suddenly, tired to the point of being incomprehensible, they left Leighton to sleep while they explored what the green stone was. Using her law magics, learnt from her tutors in the capital, Anastasia managed to determine that there was definitely some charm-based magic bound to it. With Leighton freed, he recounted how, when his new body had been created, she had gifted him the crystal as a spell focus. At some point he seemed to have swallowed it. From then on, he had only vague memories, but was aware that she required from him much of the family wealth, while also tasking him with hiding the tribute from any unwelcome attention. Suspecting that the grand tour from months before had been a cover for an overarching plan, the family gathered in the dark of night, Lord Orson and Lady Rosalinda included, formulating a plan. Not knowing how long they had until Lys was made aware of Leighton's release, they decided to call a meeting of the grand houses. While struggling to find a reason to compel the affair, Anastasia suggested that the formal introduction of Clyff among the nobility and a welcoming of him into the family would be reason enough, important enough for those bound by duty to come, and curious enough to request to inspire the lazy to make the trip as well. Leighton set about preparing the advanced version of the purification ritual, and Marcus set out to figure out how the green stone worked. By the time he and Clyff had managed to determine that it was a dangerous mix of infernal and draconic magic, the engagement celebrations were in order and set in motion. While both of them had gone along with it at first purely as an understood necessity, they decided that it might as well be an authentic a thing as it could be, agreeing privately that eventual union was inevitable by that point. Over the course of the event, Leighton managed to unbind a number of critical advisors and noble heads of houses. Once freed, there was immediate talk of war and justice. In a heated moment, Lord Orson of Riverguard managed to rein in his peers and had them see as much reason as possible. Deciding to pretend to play her game, as she seemed distant and distracted, yet it would give them time to prepare a more cohesive resistance. The question arose about what would happen after Lys and her slave king had been removed from the throne. House Marat, old rival of the throne, was disinterested in claiming it, leaving the decision falling on Lord Orson Ashford. In order to secure the support of the houses, Orson offered land to House Howard, who had already been most keen for the coming conflict and was willing enough to cede authority to Orson. Lord Rose required a marriage between the eldest daughter and the House Ashford. Leighton agreed, and with some prodding, Eres agreed as well, having found his practical and reasonable mind attractive. Then came the problem of having to secure House Ward, who had not attended in their full strength. As the great house left to their own lands in order to prepare, Amara Ward neared Marcus, stating that, while she had answered the call and came, she had no authority to declare for her people, and none who travelled with her did either. The ward siege works would be critical in taking the capital, however, meaning that this situation would have to be resolved and Ward would have to be brought into the fold. The power alone lay with her father and brother, who had remained at their home in West Ward. She also suspected that, whilst they had not given anything away to any coercion or change in their behaviour, she was sure now that they were under the control of Lys as well, citing the contract work her house had been doing in reinforcing the walls of Österland. The powers began gathering together their forces, with each great house sending a representative. Lady Iris Rose, skilled rider and spearwoman. Lord Barrett Howard, a beast of a man known for wielding 2 great swords. Amara Ward, sharpshooter and engineer extraordinaire. And finally, Lady Lita Marat, gifted druid and healer. A small group of heroes, including Marcus and Clyff, set out to the west, seeking to cross the Worldspine mountain range. Before Marcus left on his dangerous journey, Anastasia stated that she would be returning to the capital and repositioning herself as a spy, much to the dismay of her parents and siblings. She would not hear anything against her decision, however. They agreed to meet again, and she promised to leave the city before the siege could occur. In a few days of hard travel, they managed to reach the foot of the spine, readying to set across through the frosted pass, noting the near constant maelstrom of wind and snow collecting along the peaks. They would have a pass through the small town of Greysweet, which in the past was known for the mining and skill in magical item creation. As the town survived on trade, especially trade to the west, their dependency on the mountain pass between Greysweet and Craighill on the other side was paramount. It seemed that in the last few days, seemingly drawn by strange green lights in the sky, a great white dragon had taken the mountain pass for its own domain, asking exorbitant levels of tribute. Having little choice, Marcus offered to attempt to drive off the creature. As payment for taking on this extremely difficult task, the town furnished the group with weapons, enchanting those they already had, and crafting Marcus a special lightweight blade, known as the Blade of Whispers. Using knowledge of between-planar travel gained from his Memphis, his familiar, the blade could both cut spirit and flesh, existing in both realms at the same time. By this time, having been aided multiple times by Methys, Marcus and Clyff learned that the small devilish creature no longer remembered why he had become a devil, or how he came to be in the service of Madame Manice. He noted that he was truly owned by Mephistopheles, the great lord of the 8th Circle of Hell, and that Manice had named him the same name as his master because of some personal gripe she had with the devil. Readied for battle, the group set off into the mountains. After a deadly, icy battle, the group managed to slay the ancient white dragon, many of the group barely surviving. In the beast's frozen trove, they found vast amounts of coin, which was split among them. Clyff, using his keen eyes to look around the cave, found a ring which gifted the wearer command over the skies and the air, and, never having gotten his future groom a ring, thought it a perfect fit. Marcus in turn gifted Clyff his ring of Earth Command, then officially united at the throat of the world over the corpse of a vanquished foe. Among the treasures, Clyff also found a cloak, which was later found to turn into large eagle-like wings, granting him flight just as the ring gifted Marcus a similar gift. Using his skill as a hunter and a ranger, Clyff collected as many dragon scales as he could before they set off once more. During their time on the mountain, they also found a hidden entrance to a long since frosted over wizard's tower. Exploring it, they found a series of books, lenses, and writing traversing the plains, and sketches of the moon. The room seemed abandoned mid-research, and the group suspected that the mad old wizards had teleported themselves to the moon and died there. Before they left, they managed to gather together a series of potions, as well as a scroll, which, if understood correctly, would summon to the caster any figure they so choose, or open a gateway anywhere in any reality. Marcus kept the scroll together, hoping that it might be useful somewhere in the future. Thank you very much for watching, and thank you very much to Goristro's Barber on Twitter for letting me use their commission in a video. Like I said at the start of this video, these guys had 9 pages worth of backstory, so if anyone wanted to read the rest of the tale of the great Sir Marcus of House Ashford and Sir Clyff the Ranger, check out their public access Google document in the description. If you like what you see, don't forget to like and subscribe, and follow me on my Instagram, Twitter and DeviantArt. And I shall see you next time for more character designs, redesigns and commissions.